I'm so torn, Nomi, because I want to laugh at the sort of the panic a little bit about Donald Trump right now, and
which specific panic?
Well, I mean, I think there's a little bit of panic. I mean, I think like the only time that Donald Trump is honestly like feels good is when he's in front of the audience.
Yeah.
And I do mean audience, like, and he's out there and he's, just riffing, and like, I think he really likes that. And I think we're going to have this. That is going to exist until he drops dead or goes to jail.
Yep.
And then if it's in jail, we're going to get like, it's going to be like Johnny Cash, like at Folsom Prison type of thing, right? Like, he's going to.
At The Hague, he'll be like.
he'll be, like doing shows for people and then I don't know. But I do think he's getting a little panicked because, and look, I don't know it's impossible for us to know if there is even anything at all beyond Hunter Biden in some like compromising photos. My sense is there isn't. It's not like they haven't had the government resources to dig into this. There's no doubt there's a certain amount of nepotism, or not even a certain amount, like whatever the full amount of nepotism you can have, that there's that amount of nepotism and abuse of Joe Biden's name by his son, or, taking advantage of it. I don't know how you express that. It's rampant in our society. I mean, that's just the reality. Look at what's her face McCain on The View. I mean, the reason why she is a celebrity is because of John McCain.
Abby Huntsman.
And Chelsea Clinton had a job on NBC. I mean, we talk about this. Yeah. Those are just the ones that come to the
Brzezinski.
Yeah, I mean,
let's just do a show on this.
Right. I mean, honestly, you could just keep going and going. And then, Billy Carter, going back to Billy Carter was a problem for Jimmy Carter.
Giuliani's son worked for Trump too, I believe.
Yes.
He's the ambassador to like sports or some shit.
Absolutely.
Wait, who did?
Giuliani's son. I mean,
Giuliani's son, yeah.
It just goes on and on and on. I mean, that's what this whole world, is. It's just more problematic when we're talking about a public servant, right? But here is Donald Trump. He is very, very pissed that the people around him haven't been able. The Durham report fizzled out that investigation, at least as an electoral strategy. I mean, maybe it'll go on. They'll find there were abuses on the FISA process. Good. I hope so, because I've always had a problem with the FISA process. The Senate intel report on Hunter Biden fell apart. Every investigation that they had that they were going to release here fell apart, down to the point where it's like Rudy Giuliani has got to like show photocopies to one unnamed writer at the New York Post, essentially, is really what it comes down to. And even Fox News apparently was nervous about running this story. And so here is Donald Trump on with Will Cain, filling in on Fox and Friends. Will Cain was Superman, I think, right? In like some version, some iteration, or Smallville.
That's Dean Cain.
Dean Cain. Oh, all right. Well, then. Oh, Will Cain. No, Will Cain. I know that guy too. He was one of those like sort of, plays. He's like just a right-wing tar.
Clinton had his issues. I remember Billy Carter with Jimmy Carter's his issues. But I think this issue, what makes it relevant, is what Joe Biden had to do with this. What question do you have for Joe Biden in the debate? So people don't think it's a family issue. It's more about the vice presidential issue, some would say. How do you plan on parrying that issue?
Well, this is far bigger than Jimmy Carter. I mean, this is an issue his son walked around like a vacuum cleaner. But they say look, this is the laptop from hell. They say right in the laptop that, the big man has to get 10%. And then in another case, they say 50%. This is 100%. And even if he didn't get, and he does get, and he lives like a king, even if he didn't get all of this money, and everybody's known this in Washington for a long time. This isn't surprising. Nobody's surprised by this. But even if he didn't, you can't go to China and have the son walk out with $1.5 billion to manage. You can't go to Ukraine and have him get $183,000 a month with a $3 million upfront payment. You can't get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife, $3.5 million, and you have no experience. You didn't have a job until your father became vice president. It's disgraceful.
What if he says, I don't know anything about this?
And the media can't cover it. The media refuses to cover it.
Mr. President, what if he just says, I don't know anything about
Oh, God.
Right?
Wait, so let's just start with the obvious. Joe Biden, as sketchy as this is, and this is obviously the way Washington works, Joe Biden was not president at the time, number one, which we've all talked about. And number two, I just think this is a game to neutralize any sort of attacks against Trump and his circle of family and friends that are literally in the White House right now. I don't know if anybody's going to attack at this point, but I think it's neutralizing. I mean, I see it on Facebook, frankly. Like, there are folks being like, oh, well, he's just as corrupt.
That's what they're trying to do. It's
From
not
the normies. From the normies.
Yes, they're not trying to necessarily neutralize. Well, they're trying to create parity.
Yes.
That it is like, and this is what they did with Clinton too.
Yeah. Yep.
The idea is that they don't want, they're just looking to suppress votes. They're just looking for people to say, oh, so corrupt, no difference between the two of them. Doesn't matter if I vote. It's completely a play to depress turnout.
Exactly.
The problem is that if you're going to do this, I mean, the problem for Trump, okay, and this is like just putting on like just pure political analysis. It worked with Clinton because there had been like a 25-year project to sort of create this narrative. Whitewater, Travelgate. I mean, it goes on and on.
Rose Law Firm.
They had, Rose Law Firm, and they had, like, they didn't
impeachment,
impeachment, but also like Hillary Clinton killed Vincent Foster. Vince Foster. I mean, there was so much sort of like ground already tilled, as it were, that you didn't have to put just to really, overdo this metaphor. You didn't have to like put a pick in there and loosen the soil. With Hillary Clinton, it's like the soil was ready. All you needed to do was plant the seed. You didn't just drop it right in. With Joe Biden, like, there's no pre-existing notion. The guy's whole narrative has been, I'm just a regular guy. I take the train a lot. That's basically it. That, and that he was a lapdog for the banks. But I mean, in a lapdog in like a way that just sounded like he was dominated, but he wasn't necessarily capitalizing on it. There's just no narrative of him being that way.
But that's not even his narrative. I mean, that's his narrative on the left. That's his narrative on, in the last couple of years during the primaries, but it really hasn't been the mainstream narrative. I mean, if you were to ask the average viewer who's watching, these shows.
Don't remember him when he was senator from they just remember him
exactly.
as VP. Right. Yes.
But even then, they're not aware. I mean, people associate Wall Street Chuck, sure, but not, credit card Joe.
Agree totally, even on the left. But that's who Trump is trying to get at,
exactly.
Right? I mean, because it's going to be the left that's most sensitive to these type of charges. But the problem is like, you're still cutting against a narrative, and there's no evidence. Like, I'm not even clear on what, I had a vague notion of what the charges of Clinton were, that they were using their charity in some way. They were raising money for their charity based upon supposed favors that they were going to give when she was Secretary of State or something to that effect, which is also sort of like a bank shot. Like, wait a second, they're raising money for a charity to do, like, I mean, putting aside, I want to litigate all that stuff, but what the charge,
a little bit worse than that.
The charge here is that Joe Biden is getting kickbacks from his son using it. Like, I'm not even clear what it is.
But he wasn't. I mean, that's the point. It's like they need to find, there's no line there. What are they going to do? Some massive investigation in the next 2 weeks? Also, even if he was a private citizen at that time. So he could, even, let's just go with that argument. Oh yeah, he was making some kickback. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And by the way, he's disclosed his financials. So clearly he wasn't, unless he was hiding it somewhere. And and that's what they're doing, that a whole house. I mean, there's this smear effort showing his house in Delaware that he sold like 15 years ago or 20 years ago or something.
I looked into that. It's a massive house. But apparently he bought it in 1972 for about $160,000, which in today's dollars is about $600,000, I think. And he was a senator at that time. So he was making about $45,000 a year. So, you buy a house that's 3 times your annual salary with a 30-year mortgage. I mean, that's run of the mill, I think.
And his wife worked at the time.
And his wife worked too. And so, I mean, but that house, I can't believe the houses you could get at that time for.
I think I know, right? I think what's so odd about these arguments coming from Trump of all people, this bedazzled character, is it's inauthentic. And I don't know if it's going to work, but it just seems like they're throwing everything against the wall, like you said, to depress the vote. And that's it.
But here's the funny part, is that they're not throwing everything. It is almost as if Donald Trump is a one-trick pony. And we didn't recognize that because that one trick worked so well in 2016. Now, we're going to find out. I mean, there's a lot of other tricks that are going on that aren't necessarily Donald Trump, right? There's a tremendous, the number of means in which the Republicans are disenfranchising voters, in addition to COVID, creates a whole nother, sort of potential perfect storm. But they're just running the same play that they did with Clinton, right? The just straight out corruption play. But it's just a much tougher play to run. I don't know, he tried Sleepy Joe. That didn't work either, because then, the problem is that Joe showed up and he was just as coherent as Trump was. Yeah. And so, more or less. And so I think it's just very, very difficult.
So what play would it have been? I mean, what this signals to me is that he doesn't have the Bannons in the world in the room. It just doesn't seem. I mean, Bannon was all about China. It's like they latched on to China, but then they never fully carried out the China strategy because his strategists are indicted, in jail, in trouble, can't be associated with him, can't be close to him. And now it's just Trump and his 12th lineup of campaign manager, who I don't even know his campaign managers at this point, because he's
right. It's Stepien, although I think Stepien, I don't know what Stepien's COVID situations. Apparently, Melania Trump has canceled her campaign appearance because she has a lingering cough.
Trump didn't sound so good either.
Yeah, he did not. Yes, hopes and prayers, ladies and gentlemen. But part of what maybe is just missing is that they really need Joe Biden to not be an old white guy. That may have helped.
Oh, you mean Trump needed Biden to not be an old white guy from the Rust Belt-ish. Yeah. Well, that was the whole, listen, say what you will about these neoliberals not running a campaign, and God forbid something bad happens. And it could have helped to have him on the trail. It could have helped having, I don't know, field offices set up so people could get signs earlier. I mean, these are the complaints that are happening at the local level. They could still hide Joe Biden and still have an operational campaign. But that was the whole thing. How do we win over the misogynist Rust Belt voters that once voted for a Democrat?